Hello there. Continuing my segment on Upcountry Tamils, who are still considered the backbone of the Ceylon tea industry. I wish to give my viewers an insight on their lives as observed and studied as a matter of interest. With more and more acres of forest land getting cleared all over the upcountry region, more workers had to be brought down to the island. The estate owners employed recruiters who were called Kanganis, who regularly visited their native villages in South India for recruitment of cheap workers. One famous phrase they used in Tamil to make recruiting easy was, "Tea estates in Ceylon are literally flowing with milk and honey," as milk and honey were treated as super luxuries by the Tamil villagers at the time. The Kanganis had several assistants to help with the recruitment drives, and they were called sub-Kanganis. The chief recruiter was thus called head Kangani, most of whom later became either field officers in the estates or their descendants becoming the first educated elites from among the upcountry Tamils. Many of them later became famous professionals or big businessmen in towns and cities. Any worker thus brought down by a Kangani or headman was paid a certain sum of money for each day of work by the worker, and it was called pinch money. A head Kangani who recruited a large number of workers thereby received relatively large sums of money every month based on the number of days worked by his gang of workers for the month. This system was going on even in the 1970s and gradually ceased when all workers in the estates came under estate gangs or not under any Kangani. Some Kanganis under a head Kangani usually brought most of his own kith and kin or of his own caste. This resulted in caste-based groups of workers in most estates. Even the line rooms were allocated to the incoming workers according to their caste. Support from head Kangani or sub-Kanganis were vital for politicians and trade unionists even today. Estate Tamils were either not interested or not allowed to take part in any independence movement of the 1940s, as their isolation ensured they never formed political or social connections which would have made them to participate in such a movement. The end result was they did not know anything about what was to come to their very existence in Ceylon, the country they thought was going to be their motherland. Now about their citizenship. By 1946, the total number of South Indians had grown to about 780,000 or 11.7% of the population, when the Sinhalese constituted about 69.4%. Thus, the Sinhalese naturally resented the presence of aliens in the country. The island gained independence on 4th February 1948. The newly formed Sinhalese-dominated government brought the Ceylon Citizenship Bill before Parliament. Outwardly, the bill was to provide means of obtaining citizenship to the Indian Tamil, but in reality, it discriminated against them by denying them citizenship. The bill stipulated that A. Those who wished to obtain citizenship had to prove that their father was born in Ceylon, and B. that they were at least third generation immigrants. These rules became impossible to be met for most, as A. many Indians used to go back to India for childbirth and return after some time. B. those who were really third generation immigrants rarely had the necessary documents because they rarely registered their birth. Therefore, they could not prove the requirements for citizenship. The bill was fiercely opposed in Parliament by the Ceylon Indian Congress, later known as Ceylon Workers' Congress or CWC, and the Sinhalese leftist parties. The bill was passed on 20th August 1948 and became law on 15th November 1948, less than a year after Ceylon gained its independence from Britain. It resulted in more than 700,000 people being denied citizenship, while only about 5,000 of the Indian Tamils qualified for Sri Lankan citizenship. Politics and power. Even long after this period, the estate Tamils were isolated socially and politically. Slowly but surely, their ties with South India started to diminish. Though they were much attracted to South Indian films and their homes were filled with pictures and magazines of their film idols and some Tamil Nadu leaders like C.N. Annadurai or M.G. Ramachandran Karunanidhi, indicating their political interest still lay with their country of origin. However, the generation that followed became more involved with local politics and trade unionism thanks to leaders like Mr. S. Tondaman, M.A. Aziz and Mr. C.V. Velupillai and other leaders who succeeded them. The remaining estate Tamils of Indian origin continued to struggle for their day-to-day existence. They had the lowest life expectancy of any community in Sri Lanka, highest illiteracy rate and lowest income. Most live in abysmal housing built during the colonial days with little or no improvement. A significant event took place on 29th October 1964 when the government led by Mrs. Sirimao Bandaranaike, the world's first woman Prime Minister, signed a pact with the Indian Prime Minister known as Sirima Shastri Pact. This pact paved the way for the repatriation of 525,000 stateless plantation Tamils of Indian origin to India. Another 300,000 persons were to be accepted as citizens of Sri Lanka, which made them enter the polity, leaving a residue of 150,000. Thus, the fate of a total of 975,000 Tamils of Indian origin who were not accepted as citizens of Ceylon was supposed to have been sealed on that day, one way or another. The pact was indeed a breakthrough. However, things took a different turn in subsequent years. Though the Sirima Shastri Pact was a historical agreement to settle the stateless problem, implementation became almost impossible after the ethnic civil war engulfed the country in 1983. During this period, the then President Mr. J.R. Jayawardena granted Sri Lankan citizenship to all those deemed stateless. He thought such a move could keep his United National Party's vote base intact forever. The new development gave the estate Tamils a great advantage politically. In subsequent election, they won a large number of seats in the National State Assembly or Provincial Council and other local bodies in places where their presence was overwhelming. While the estate Tamils were engaged in their day-to-day struggle for better wages and better living and working conditions, the ethnic war with the LTT dominated the country, tearing it apart. Estate Tamil votes became vital to any government as the main parties had to depend on them to win outright parliamentary majority. No government wanted any link to develop between the estate Tamils and the LTT, and therefore the estate Tamils received some minimum concessions. I am afraid this episode has gone a bit longer than expected. As such, I will stop for now and continue the balance segment in my next episode. Thank you for viewing.